So with that, we have three amazing panelists, and I want to give each one of them 10 to 12 minutes or so to kind of speak to their knowledge area and their experience currently in the product management labor market. Our first speaker is Albert Kwan. Albert is a technology marketing and talent acquisition professional. He's very passionate about bringing attention to innovative technologies and standout professionals to generate revenue and job opportunities and growth. He's the founder of Albert's List and has an extensive online presence in the job list and referral space. There's currently over 44,000 members of Albert's List on Facebook. And he, like myself, graduated from Santa Clara University and is a—
Go Broncos!
Exactly. And is a San Francisco Bay Area native. So with that, welcome, Albert, and we look forward to hearing what you have to share on what's going on lately and what's new.
Yeah, and thank you for having me here. It is awesome to be here. I believe I'm here by way of Brendan, so Brendan gets a lot of credit too. I follow him on Facebook and see all the wonderful things that he does for in the area of product management, and so I'm very honored to speak with you all. So I think Tom gave me a little bit of an intro. I work in the cloud computing space. I guess I'm kind of the hybrid between product marketing and writing, sort of content writing in that sense. And so I'd love to grow up to be a product manager, but maybe someday. I founded Albert's List. It's a community with 44,000 members, at least in the Bay Area. If you add up everything that we have, Bay Area, Southern California, it's like 48, almost 50,000. And people in our group have found results. Companies, they've been hired at companies like Google, Cisco, GoPro, Twitter, and my LinkedIn profile is there. I'll have this in the thank you area again. So just to talk a little bit about Albert's List, since I was called upon today to discuss sort of how to use Albert's List and what it is and why it's so important right now before I hop into the economic data. I founded it March 5th, 2013. Pretty much because I myself had struggled in the job search as a new career grad just 3 years prior. Didn't know how to interview, didn't know how to write a resume all that well, and finally found some footing in my career and wanted to give back to some other people. And so it's a group I never expected to grow past 5,000. It's a group that's definitely grown into definitely a side hustle that I never imagined it to be. And so what do? We connect job seekers, recruiters, hiring managers, career coaches, and more. And so you'll meet everyone from fellow job seekers who are, in product management and careers beyond that, recruiters who both recruit for on a contract basis and for the companies that they work for. And then people who are hiring directly who want to go past recruiters, and then career coaches if you're looking for additional resources and support from communities such as this one. Our audience is mainly tech and includes nonprofit work as well, but you're going to find a lot of people who work in tech there. We share really interesting, funny memes. Today, for example, we had a very tech meme that's JavaScript focused. Apparently, I think if you're driving past San Jose International Airport, there's a billboard in JavaScript that talks about why you should wear a mask and stay 6 feet away from each other. I have no idea what it's saying, but it's very par for the Bay Area. We also, if you're interested in moving to other areas around the country and around the state, have very active groups in Southern California, Texas, the Sacramento Valley, and also New York City. And so those groups aren't as active as our groups, but we definitely have people there who can help you along the lines of your career. And so the link is really easy. It's a bit.ly link that'll take you to the Facebook group, basically bit.ly/findyournextjob. And so as you look throughout into today's world for all the attention and everything, because we do live in a much more competitive world because so many people are unemployed, and somewhere between 28 to 30 million people are currently receiving some kind of unemployment benefits. The group is a great addition to what it is you're looking for when you're looking for that next job of yours. And so how can you use the group? I identified maybe 6 different use cases to take a word out of your dictionaries to really help in your career. The image on the right is a perfect example of one that we've been seeing lately, which is a success story, right? We love success stories on Albert's List because it shows that the support of the community works, that the advice and the tips that you take from all of our webinars that we do on a regular basis are actionable and lead to positive results. But yeah, you can find your next role in this group. We've got lots of companies, individual companies hiring product managers, other networking people who you can network with who are product managers that are hiring. So if you're hiring as well, we'd love to have you too. You can connect with other product managers, connect with other hiring authorities. Sometimes they'll post, sometimes our recruiters will go out there and they will make a post around what their tips are, because a lot of people aren't doing what they're supposed to do when it comes to applying for a job, whether it's not writing their resume the right way, marketing themselves poorly on LinkedIn, saying the wrong thing on their resume, and in a situation that I've seen all too much when it comes to marketing somebody, when somebody's marketing themselves on their job search, selling themselves short. In fact, that's probably the most heartbreaking thing when I see somebody's resume and they've stuck all the great things towards the bottom and they don't talk about themselves in a way that will get them hired. How else can you use the group? You can definitely introduce yourself. We're always looking for great introductions from people, and the best introductions are from people who not only have something that they're looking for, but something that they can also offer the community. You can also ask for advice, both as a known individual and unknown. Something that we've had over the last couple of years is a feature called Anonymous Asks. As of today, we have 375 anonymous questions that have been asked. And these questions get a lot of responses. There's a lot of support from people. A lot of people want to help. And finally, success stories. And so feel free to join the community. We'd love to have you there. And when you join, just answer the question on Facebook and let us know that you found us through Silicon Valley PMA, and we can go from there. And so the next part I want to talk about is some recent economic data, right? And so it's a really uncertain time for a lot of us. It's a really nerve-wracking time for a lot of us. And I wanted to talk in 2 different angles here. The first I wanted to go into was what we've heard from recruiters. Over the last 6 months, I've spoken to quite a few recruiters who have come on for webinars and separately, and have come up to a couple of conclusions around what it is that they've noticed. And the first one is that if you're struggling in this job market, it's not you, it's COVID-19. So a lot like, dating, it's not you, it's me. In this case, it's not you, it's a global pandemic that has completely ravaged and shut everything down in ways that we've never seen in modern history. The number 2 piece is now is not the time to rebrand your career. One person said yesterday, one of my recruiters on a webinar that we had yesterday was saying that, if you're like an accountant right now is not the time to become a chef, because you're going to be competing against the best of the best chefs who've been laid off during COVID-19. And so if you're somebody who's a product manager and you're on this call and you're thinking that tomorrow you want to be an accountant, it may not necessarily be easy because you're going to be competing against all the accountants in the world. As of right now, the better way to go is to work on training yourself and gaining new skills that are going to help push your career forward. And I really like the fact that you guys all encourage a bookshelf here and reading. And so that's definitely one way to go. A little bit of hope. Companies that initially shut down but are starting to hire again because they know that they need to continue doing business. So business is picking up for recruiters, and it may very well be picking up through the holidays because a lot of companies realize that they still have budget left. So don't stop your job hunting journey because you think you may need to wait until budgets reopen in the new year. And then tech continues to be hot. Since the beginning of COVID, I've been tracking job patterns on my group. basically tagging job listings with the we're hiring tag. And the things that we've noticed that have been really prevalent throughout have been jobs that are absolutely corporate essential type roles. So this is marketing, sales, operations, and then of course software and computer engineering, because we're in the Bay Area. And then because we do get a little bit of like manufacturing and things like that, those roles are also important because you need to keep supply chains going, among other things. And so if you want to work in an industry that touches an industry that is essential, or you want to position yourself as somebody that a company needs very very much and is essential, then those are the places for you. What we've heard from economists. So every first Friday of the month, we review the Bureau of Labor Statistics report and cover some job trends that are really important. And so the person that we usually speak with is Professor Riley White, Dr. Professor Riley White. He's an economist out of the University of New Mexico. He tracks Bay Area job stats very, very closely. And a couple of things that we discovered over the last couple of months is that, despite the employment rate now dropping to 7.9% from where we were all the way at the end of March, April, we've seen a lot of economic shift over the time. And so the reason why the unemployment rate dropped is that's because 700,000 people left the workforce, and total employment only actually increased 275,000. And so we're seeing a lot of people now having been unemployed now for almost more than half the year. And so because job benefits eventually fall off, those individuals are no longer recorded as receiving benefits. And so the actual unemployment rate, which is the U6 rate, which I don't have in front of me here, is significantly higher. And so that's one thing to note if you're having discussions around the health of the economy. Tomorrow morning is a day that I always pay attention to because it's the day that new unemployment claims come out. And so a recent change in how the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks this number has also changed. And so you're seeing lower numbers than usual, but that doesn't mean that there are a lot of people who are losing out on work. And that's because, the recovery is slower than usual, right? We have stimulus that has been muted, permanent layoffs going on, especially in the airline industry and also in tech. Fewer women employed, and we're also seeing a huge disparity with people of color being employed as well. So especially those on the front line are being really, really affected. And then finally, I think the piece of data that is especially of note is that, during a lot of our normal economic times, the information and professional services jobs, which is what the Bureau of Labor Statistics says it as, usually are okay. But in these times, it's been actually a lot different. And so technology jobs in the information sector lost 8.1% in August. That's a lot of the work that we all do here in this community. And then professional services also lost another 5% in August. And so that's the latest data that we have specific to the Bay Area, which means that the economy is actually continuing to contract in the Bay Area. And that's also reason why it may be tougher to find work, and also reason why I'm saying that it's not necessarily you, but it's COVID-19. Final slide here before I hand it back off. So your next steps as far as what you need to do, I'm sure the folks who are coming after me are going to talk about this a lot more. Number one is to keep networking. People don't work with people it's not who you know or what you know, but rather who knows you. So the more people who know what it is that you are able to do and what situation you're in, the better they can to help you. Number two is to keep working hard, whether that's to gain skills and to not be a victim in terms of what state you're in. I heard a member earlier here who was talking about how he started his own face mask business, and that's really, really amazing, right? So this could be the time to start that project that you never thought you'd be able to start. And number three, don't change your career unless you absolutely have to. Now is not the time to rebrand, and to just keep going in the way that you're going, and we will be soon and out of this pandemic eventually, I think, maybe by next spring. So hopefully we can all handle it until then. With that, thank you for the pleasure of your time, and here's some of my contact information, and I will see all of you in the question and answer.
Thanks, Albert. That was really interesting, especially with some, more and more of our world is driven by data. So seeing some backup data behind what's going on kind of is a great way to put things in context. Our next panelist is Sandra Clark. She is a LinkedIn coach and trainer, and LinkedIn being another primary source for getting yourself out there and finding opportunities and promoting yourself. That's a key part of any kind of modern career planning, both in terms of applying for jobs and finding jobs, but also in terms of how to effectively communicate your skills and what you want to be doing. So Sandra's been helping people with LinkedIn since for over 10 years. And she offers coaching services to help professionals build their online brand and showcase their talent on LinkedIn. So she was chosen as one of 10 international LinkedIn members to help facilitate conversations and assist members in the LinkedIn forums for the community team pilot. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Sandra, and I'm sure she'll have some very interesting things to say about from the LinkedIn perspective.
No pressure or anything.
No.
So where am I going here? Just share my slides. So I'm glad that Albert talked about networking and you know, that whole job search process, and that's so important. So I'm going to talk about a lot of specific things, much more specific in content, but some of them are things you know, and I know you know, and I still look at your profiles and I see it's not there. So I'm going to talk about some basics, because I'm sorry, I need to slap you around sometimes to remind you. And I'm also going to talk about a few more advanced things. And I'm also going to talk about the new things on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has actually done about 40 changes just in the last 3 months, maybe more. And a lot of those are specific to job seekers. And so I'm going to touch on a few of them that I think might be of interest to you. Some of them you may have seen, some you might not have. So this is your magical mystery formula for LinkedIn success. It needs to be complete. Yeah, what does complete mean? And I'll talk about that in a minute. You need to have your keywords. And if you don't know your keywords, please talk to someone, figure them out, because a lot of searches on LinkedIn by recruiters is done by keywords. So you need to have them. You need to have connections. And just to frighten some of you a little bit, I reckon you should have at least 30 connections for every year of your age. I'll let you do the calculations. When I'm doing this live, I usually see eyes get wide and they get a little panic stricken. The idea is that you meet at least 30 people professionally a year. Why not connect with them on LinkedIn? Because that is truly the power of LinkedIn, your connections. You need to be active on LinkedIn. Activity on LinkedIn is the magic. That is truly the magic, and you've got to pay attention to that. All of those things together are going to bring you maximum visibility and high search engine optimization ranking. So, basic components. What's a complete profile? And I can't talk about each of these in details, but just to remind you, and again, I know you know, but I'm still going to tell you, you need a photo. No more than a couple of years old. I'm sorry, I know it's COVID, it's hard to get new photos. Go out in the backyard with a decent a phone camera and get one. You need to have a professional headline. You need to have a good and complete about section. That is your opportunity to do your elevator speech and really talk about yourself. You need your job history. And I'll be interested actually from the other panelists' idea about this. I usually say to people that they should not have everything that's on their resume on their LinkedIn profile. And I can explain why I think that later. You need your education there, your skills, and your contact information, because you want to make it easy for people to reach you, and connections. Those things together, there's so many other things on LinkedIn you can add. It will drive you crazy. And even if you forget everything else and just do this, you'll be in good shape. So one of the things that happens on LinkedIn, that top section under your name is called your headline. It is not called your job title. However, when you add a new job into LinkedIn, the default, unless you uncheck that sneaky little box, is to overwrite that headline and put in your job title and the name of the company. Now you are so much more than your job title. It used to be a limit of 120 characters. It's actually now 220. It's about 4 lines. I actually don't like the longer ones, but you have no excuse not to have your keywords in there and perhaps a tagline, something that's unique or special about you. Now you also can have your job title and the name of your company if you want. There's now plenty of room, but think about what your brand is, who you are, and how you want to be known. So this is partly new, partly old. A year or so ago, when LinkedIn changed their design, we only see the first 3 lines of your about section. Your experience sections was also all shrunk up. So I don't know about you, but most people I know have short attention spans. Who the heck clicks on see more? Not too many people. So you need to make sure those 3 lines at the beginning of your about section pack a punch. You want them to be so intriguing that people just have to click on show more, or you want them to have complete information right there. So if they don't click on see more, they basically got a snapshot of you. So everything on LinkedIn is much more about, with your marketing mind, short ads, just do it. Quick impressions of things to bring people in to want to learn more. Now, the new thing this summer is the featured section. And this is a great place for you to showcase kind of like a portfolio. You can have videos there. You can have website, blogs, articles, posts. You can kind of showcase yourself, strut your stuff a little bit. And for those of you who want to promote your company, this is a place you actually could put something about your company. It doesn't have to just be about you. But if you don't do the fancy stuff and you just do the basics, you're still going to get found for job searches. But then when people get there and see something a little more exciting. So my big mistake that I see, remember that old Kevin Costner movie? Build it and they will come. I can't tell you how many people I hear say, oh, I've got a LinkedIn profile. It looks good. I fixed it up. I paid someone to help me with it a year or 2 ago. It looks good. Yeah, so they are not, maybe the days years ago, recruiters used to just find it and they would come to you. I don't think that happens too often anymore. So you can't just have a great profile, let it sit there and think that they're just going to come to you. You've got to work a little bit. So this is the biggest mistake I see people making. So back to Albert's point about making connections, joining groups, growing that number of connections. You need to connect more broadly, connect strategically. I'm not telling you to connect with just anybody randomly. You need to reconnect with old colleagues, and you need to be visible. When you post something on LinkedIn or you comment or like, that only goes into the newsfeed of about 10% of all of your connections newsfeed. So having that larger network, that's going to help. But then when you're seen, every time your name pops up, that's an opportunity for somebody to think, oh gosh, yeah, Joe, I remember him. I used to work with him at, I wonder whether he'd be interested in this job we've got open. You want to be in people's minds. And that's that whole activity thing on LinkedIn. Your colleagues that you've known over the years that you've always remembered to connect to on LinkedIn. And if you didn't then, you're going to now. Even those old college friends, they're now CEOs and managers at companies. Reconnect with them. It's kind of fun. Not too scary for those of you who, I specialize in what I call social media for the socially reluctant. So I work with a lot of people who are kind of uncomfortable putting themselves out there. This isn't too bad though, reconnecting with old colleagues. These are the people that are going to help you get jobs. They love you. They liked working with you before, I hope. They want to do it again. Be visible online. You don't have to post original content. You actually get more visibility simply liking and commenting on other people's stuff. Let them do the hard work and you just engage with them. People want to refer you. Make it easy. Sometimes I want to refer someone, but I find it difficult because their LinkedIn profile is pretty bad, doesn't represent them well. So make it easy, have a good profile, and let people help you. So some of the new features, I'm sure some of you have noticed this new little ribbon or frame around your headshot that says you're open to work. And it shows not just to recruiters, but also to anybody who looks at your profile that you're open to work. Now this, I'd be interested in the opinion of the other panelists. LinkedIn trainers, traditionally we've taught people that being too overt about looking for work makes you look too hungry. It's not a good thing. LinkedIn is saying this is awesome. They're showing these statistics, where they get their statistics from, I'm not sure, that this is really helping people. I'm not sure, jury's still out for me, but just be aware it is there. It shows prominently, or you can simply, the old way you used to do it, just show it to recruiters and not show to other people looking at your profile. The other thing that's new, and one of them I think is cool, you can actually do interview prep. All the standard questions you get in interviews, you can pick a question and then you can practice doing a video and record it and then send it to your career coach, to a friend, and get feedback. And since everything's online now, I think that's great. You also can build multiple resumes. I think it's a little complicated to use. It's kind of good. I don't see that really catching on, but it is there. They're really paying attention to job seekers. So that's it in a very squished nutshell. So hopefully that will get you thinking, but you've got to pay attention to it. Even if you hate it, people are looking, and they, let them know about you, and you'll get that job if that's what you're looking for a lot faster, or you'll be seen as a thought leader if that's something you want to do, and a manager of choice.
Thank you, Sandra. That was I'd say that's the dehydrated version, just add coffee. So with that, I'd like to rotate to our final panelist, Tom Burchard. If any of you have perused the archives of the SVPMA website, you may have noticed his name appearing a number of times. He's got a number of presentations in our archive. He's been working as a talent acquisition professional since, quote unquote, before it was cool. Started in the 1990s at a company called Pacific Data Images. And for those of you who, if that doesn't ring a bell, if you've ever seen the movie Shrek, that was the computer animation company that put that together. He assisted with the hiring there. Originally was wanting to be a computer animator, but fell in love with recruiting. He's worked at SanDisk, at EMC, at Visa, at Symantec, and has run programs both locally and globally. And he's currently leading strategic programs for a cybersecurity company called Proofpoint locally here in the Bay Area. With that, take it away, Tom, and let us know what you have to share.
Awesome. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yay. I didn't have to hear the whole, you're on mute, which I despise now. Anyways, first of all, I want to say thank you very much for inviting me back. After my last presentation, I was looking, I think it's like March or February or something like that. I didn't know if I was going to get invited back, so this is cool, and I'm really happy to be here. So today I'm going to be talking about job searching today, right? So job searching in today's world, a lot of it stays the same, a lot of it changes, but it's, I'm going to share with you just some tips and tricks about job searching, a little bit on product management, but product management really does encompass, the way you search for a product management job really does encompass the way you search for a lot of jobs. So the key tenets are the same. But the other term is how to conduct a job search during COVID without throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. So that's really what we're doing, is we're trying to focus on, hey, what can you do as a candidate to make yourself more marketable, to make yourself somebody that the employers will look at. There's a few little fun things that I've thrown in here to kind of get you some ideas. Some things are going to be in the presentation, some things I'll try to share verbally. But I always start out, anytime I'm doing a presentation like this, I always start out looking for answers, right? I want to see what the world is saying about these sort of topics, right? Finding a job and such. So I started out with Google. This is last night as I'm tidying up my presentation, right? I typed in the words finding a J, right, with a J. And of course, Google came back with all the top search terms, right? Finding a job during COVID, finding a job during coronavirus, finding a job you love, another COVID one, finding the right book, finding a job in another state. But there's a lot of interest in how do you find a job during COVID right now? And that's showing up as some of the key search terms. Then I put the words in just for fun. I put in, I need a job. And it's like, people are really, I need a job. I need a job right now. I need a job immediately. I need a job, please help me. There's just a lot of people looking for answers. Then of course, that other search engine that doesn't do as good of a job branding itself. So grabbing the actual title of that other search engine and putting it in a little snippet doesn't really work. But I put that in, and the same thing I tried with Google in the beginning. I put finding a job, and they showed up with only one little thing on COVID, but it was very interesting. Their searches came back with finding a job over 50, finding a job over 60, finding a job with a felony, all sorts of interesting search terms that weren't in the Google one. So it was interesting to see what the different search engines are coming back with. But I started digging into some of these things, and it started making my head hurt. So I decided to kind of go back to basics. And I basically decided resume tenets remain the same, right? The stuff that you did pre-COVID still is relevant today. And you really have to be focused on them. I forgot to put on my timer here so I can keep myself on track. But a resume should be relevant to the job you want. Oftentimes people have a general resume, and oftentimes people have a general LinkedIn profile, right? And we can talk about, people making specific LinkedIn profiles and such. I'm not the LinkedIn expert. My esteemed colleague is, but keeping a resume relevant to the job is often really a great tool. So then if you're looking for a product management position in a particular area, and you have some of that skills, putting that in the resume very specifically for that job is a great idea. Provide real examples, not hypothetical ones, on your resume. People often say, like, given the opportunity, I would do this. Given the opportunity, I would do that. Real examples are more important than fake ones. Using data to highlight your accomplishments. So percentages and numbers, all very, very important. Chronological resumes track so much better than a functional resume. Everybody know what a functional resume is? It's sort of like a list of all the things you've done at the top, and then sort of like just bullet points laying out all the jobs you've done or that you've had over a past number of years. That doesn't track as well with recruiters, so chronological resumes are generally a much better idea. Keeping it to 2-page max, unless you have relevant or publications or patents, right? 2 pages for a resume is enough. And one of the words to the wise I always tell people is you're going to spend the most amount of time with your most recent job. Even if it's not a very long stint, you're going to spend a decent amount of time there. And then as you go back in time, the experiences that you had to kind of get you to that next level, it kind of goes down. So maybe the first job will have 4 to 5 bullet points, the most recent one, and then you're gonna maybe 4 bullet points, maybe 3, 2, 1, and then the other jobs might just be listing it out. I was this, I was that, I was a software engineer, then I was a senior software engineer, and then I got into software management, and then you start to see a little bit more data. But keeping it to 2 pages max, every couple of years, you probably wanna kind of tidy up the resume and make sure it's still relevant. Have a summary of you as a professional at the top, very similar to that LinkedIn summary. Kind of put those couple sentences up on top of your resume describing who you are. Know the details, right? So that's where people get a little tripped up, is they claim things, right, that they've done, and they've done them, but gosh, if I can remember exactly how it all worked out. And you'll be surprised what recruiters will find on a resume, and they'll go, wow, tell me about when you did this. And then the person kind of fumbles and they're like, oh, yeah, I did that, 12 years ago. And let me think about that. And I seem to remember there was a person in an orange coat, and right, you get tripped up. So you want to make sure you know the details of your resume, and when asked, can talk to them. And you got to puff read your regime. Spell check is hot enough. Spell check just doesn't cover some of the spelling mistakes people make in their resumes. It really is crazy. They just hit spell check. They think everything's good. And this pass spell check, right? This little phrase at the bottom here, pass spell check, because people just don't think that spell check is not going to catch everything. And spell check really doesn't catch grammatical errors and things like that. So have other people look at it, but really do puff read your regime. And then inflating your experience remains a bad idea. Sometimes people will, I got my little animation here, yay. But it remains a bad idea. You don't want to overinflate or make it look like you had more experience doing something than you really have. That's where the functional resumes get in trouble, right? People will start pulling out pieces of their background that they may have done 10 years ago, and they put it as a second or third bullet point in that functional resume. And so it implies that they know a lot about that third bullet point, and then they just can't back it up, right? So you got to be a little careful of that. So moving away from resumes, kind of getting into interviewing, and interviewing has shifted, right? So there's been a very significant shift in the way we interview. So just to give a little bit about my job, I'm in charge of all strategic recruiting programs at Proofpoint. Proofpoint is a cybersecurity company in Silicon Valley. We are still very much hiring, but I'm in charge of all strategic recruiting programs, workforce planning. I'm in charge of the university program. I'm in charge of the recruiting coordination function, so that function that gets you into the company to interview, and among a variety of other things, including our talent brand. But interviewing itself has shifted. And if you take a look at what has stayed the same, you still need to be on time and be prepared. You still need to research the company and the team. You got to know, I talked a little bit about this, you got to know what you've done and be able to talk about it. Successes and, importantly, failures, right? People are going to ask you about the things that you failed at. If you don't have a good answer, then it's going to come across poorly, right? So you really want to focus on, how do I not spin it? Spinning it is not what I'm asking you to do. What I'm asking you to do is look at your failures as opportunities for learning. What did you learn from your experience? I can tell you all sorts of failures that I've had, right? Managers that I've chosen to work for, or people that I've chosen to hire, or maybe strategic decisions that didn't work out the way I was expecting them to work out, or things that were a flop when you set up an event and only 2 people show up, right? All sorts of failures that I've had in my past. And what have I looked at those as opportunities for learning? So you got to prepare that in your own mind. And then insightful questions, right? Insightful questions that you ask at the end of an interview to let them know, that you are interested in them and that you really want to learn about whether this opportunity is a great fit for you. So what's different? Find a private place to do the Zoom. I actually today, this is not my house in the background. My in-laws are actually in our bubble. We see them because they're in our bubble. So I went over to my in-laws' place because I got 4 kids at home. 4 kids. And those 4 kids would be climbing on daddy if I was doing this at home. So my in-laws were gracious enough to let me come over here. But the same thing applies when you're interviewing. If you're going to, people understand occasional interruptions, or a little 4-year-old or 6 or 7-year-old's head popping up in the Zoom meeting, not a problem. But you really want to find a private place so you can concentrate, because the interview is going to be about you. Right? How can you concentrate if you're constantly, having these interruptions? Enable your video feed, right? So if you're interviewing, don't be the face, right? That's just, or the name that shows up. Enable your video feed. You'd be surprised. Some people are like, I'm not camera ready. Well, then don't interview, right? You want to be face-to-face, and avoid the virtual backgrounds when you're interviewing, if at all possible. Okay, fine. If your house is falling apart or whatever, right? Fine, but avoid it if possible, because you got to come across genuine. You got to come across as somebody that the person would love to work beside them, and having a virtual background sort of detracts from being genuine. Make sure you have good lighting. Avoid distracting hand gestures. I am not doing a good job of that today. I'm hand gesturing all over the place. But when you're interviewing, it is better for you to, maybe occasionally to punctuate a point, but hands flying all over the place during an interview tend to distract the interviewer. So hand gestures, don't get too casual. It's an interview after all, right? Make sure you wear something nice on top, and I'm wearing shorts, right? But make sure you have something on your bottom half, skirt, shorts, whatever it is, something to cover up, because occasionally that 7-year-old comes in and there's something breaking in the kitchen that I need to go handle. So I stand up and guess what? I don't have appropriate attire on the lower half of my body. So you just got to be careful of that, and practice authenticity, right? Be authentic. It's not as easy as you think on a Zoom. Building that rapport with the person is so much more harder, more difficult when we're separate. Additional advice, specifically for product management. I've done a lot of recruiting in product management, and companies call them and use different titles. Some say product managers, some companies say new product introduction. Some people interchange the titles. So when you're looking for that product management job, just really dig into the job description and the requirements that the company's asking for. And oftentimes you'll see program manager, but it's a product manager job, right? And so really kind of open yourself up to not just look at titles, but look at kind of the details. Referrals do remain the best way to get a job. We talked about that networking. My previous colleagues here, our previous speakers did talk about how to network and such, but it's 33 to 50% or more of the hires still come from those employee referrals, and referrals speak for you when you're not there, right? So your resume is sort of the foundation, right? The resume is the foundation, or your LinkedIn profile is the foundation, whatever that first piece is. But your referral, the person in the company that knows you, will say, let me give you the behind the scenes look at this person, right? And why they're a good fit for the company. And don't be afraid to reach out to the hiring manager directly, using professional networks. Stalking people on, I don't know, Facebook and stuff, that kind of feels weird. You can go into whitepages.com and try to find their home number. Don't know if I'd advise that. But reaching out through LinkedIn and other professional sites is a fine way. And if you can find their work email, and there's all sorts of ways to find people's actual email at work, you can ping the server with things like email verifier and such to see if it's a valid email address. But that's okay too. Hi, Susan, I saw your position listed. I'd love to be considered for the job. And the reality is unemployment is up and attrition is down, right? We went from 10% attrition average to like 2, right? So people are not looking for jobs. Just people moving around as much is much, much, much lower. So there is a lot of competition out there. I think Albert mentioned it. Now's not the time to be changing jobs, because guess what? The best of the best are looking for jobs right now. So, and that's true, because attrition is just down. People are staying, and there are companies that are doing kind of mass layoffs and such. So do keep your eyes on the prize there. And then closing, a few resume blunders from those who didn't get the job. I love these, but people I put on the resume: languages, English, Mandarin, and Spanish. Demonstrated ability in multitasking, probably the person who speaks Spanish. Filing, billing, printing, and coping. Me too. I do a good job at coping. Job duties, career break in 2019 to renovate my horse. Poor horse. Oh, I feel so bad for that horse that got renovated. Experience, stocking, shipping, and receiving. Yay. Objective, I'm anxious to use my exiting skills. Well, gosh, maybe that person will have a chance to do just that. But that's pretty much it. I'm done, ready for questions, and ready to turn back over the mic back to SVPMA pros. Thank you.
Excellent. That was highly entertaining as well as informative. When you were saying be authentic, I remember, and I've forgotten who I'm quoting, but they said authenticity is everything. Once you learn how to fake that, you've got it made. So with that, if folks have their chat window open, we're open to taking questions numerous ways. You can type a question into the chat window. You can raise your hand like Jim Shibler's doing right now. And if I notice you, I can call on you, but I will caveat the fact that I can only see about a third of you or a quarter of you at one given time. So if I'm flipping through the pages and you're frantically waving your hand, throw something in the chat window, say, hey, I'm on page 4, and like I'm waving my hand. So with that, we'll turn over the first question to Jim Shibler.
Thanks, Tom. And thanks, Tom. And thanks, Sandra, and thanks, Albert. Just had a couple of quick follow-ups. Albert had mentioned it's not a good time to make a change. That kind of conflicts with something I had also heard, which is right now, people are a little more forgiving of making a change. So if you wanted to make a significant pivot, you're more likely to be understood for doing that. Yeah, you had to do something different. That makes sense if you're doing a job now that maybe dried up and is starting to not look so good, like hospitality or something. But I agree that if you have a strength in some area, you're probably well advised to land on your laurels. In other words, come in with the credibility you've got, because if you pivot and you're going into something that does have significant competition, very good point that you're up against some pretty good talent on the street. As far as Sandra goes, one thing I didn't see you mention, Sandra, was social proof. So I was thought you might have included the endorsements and recommendations. Did you want to comment about that?
Well, I picked and chose what I could in the time, and the whole endorsements became kind of Mickey Mouse when people were endorsing you for skills you didn't have, for things they didn't know you have. So endorsements have debatable value, having the skills there do. Social proof is important. Recommendations are great. You should have them, but especially those, as you get more senior, it becomes more awkward to ask. So yeah, they're great, but there are other ways to get around that too.
Thanks.
Our next question, thanks very much, by the way, that was helpful. Our next question comes from Mark Miller, who had a question for the group.
Hi there. So I had been talking to a friend of mine who recently got a director of product management position, and he said that someone told him that the seniority of the role needs to be proportional to the length of the resume. That, for example, a director position needed 6 pages plus. And that's not something I had ever heard of before. But then again, I'm not usually applying for a director and above. What is the thought on that? Does the length of the resume need to reflect enough seniority to warrant that title?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. So I'll just go in. Who are you initially trying to get the attention of, right? Initially, you're trying to get the attention of the recruiter in most cases, right? So the recruiter is reading the resume. Recruiters they're an impatient bunch, right? So recruiters are like, get to the point and tell me it. I don't want to spend like more than about 12.2 seconds, and that's probably 6 seconds too long, reading this resume, because I got another 25 that I have to go through, and then I got another 15 recs that I'm working on, and I have managers screaming at me for those. I got 3 offers that I'm working on and 5 interviews that are happening, of which 2 of them have people not showing up. So I am stressed. So I'm going to look at this resume, and I'm going to need you to tell me quickly, is this something that is really a good fit? And I look at a resume as a way to kind of bridge that gap between opportunity and you, to kind of get the manager to go, okay, I need to know more. There's not a lot here. I need to know more, but gosh, it's hitting the right things. And so why don't we set up a phone screen, or why don't we go and dig a little deeper and bring the person in for an interview, and then you have the opportunity. I don't think a 3-page resume is bad. I just think that you want to keep it succinct. And if you really focus on what the most important things are, you will find that your first page is actually the best real estate. That is the most important things. And you're focusing on that, and you're highlighting that. And then the rest of it, it becomes more like, I don't know what the right term is, table stakes, I don't know. But and then your education can be the last thing. So you kind of get people looking at both pages. 3 pages and on.
Nice.
Could I piggyback something on that?
Yeah.
With LinkedIn, what I usually tell people is that you don't want everything on LinkedIn. You don't want your whole resume there. You want a little bit like Tinder. You want enough information to tease them to want to know more. And when they want to know more, they ask for your resume, which you can then customize appropriately and give them more. So I'd love to hear Tom's opinion about that. Am I leading people
Tinder,
astray?
that just happened. That just happened. Oh my gosh, we were talking about Tinder. All right, so you totally distracted me, Sandra. So I'm like, whoa. But no, I think that you're absolutely correct. You do want to keep it to the point, similar with the resume. A resume may go a little more detail, but you do want to just give people an idea of who you are. You can get into some of the accomplishments, your highlights, the things that are defining moments at each of your career on LinkedIn, right? But let's keep in mind that sometimes if you go too specific, you can actually screen yourself out of a job, right? Without even knowing it, right? You're putting all these examples that you think are great, and the company that's looking at your LinkedIn profile is like, yeah, that's not us, right? So let me give you a real example of how that could come to play. So EMC, I was at EMC. It's a big company. It was when I was there, it was 60,000 people. Then they got acquired by Dell and it was 140,000 people. The stuff I did at LinkedIn that was impactful, I'm sorry, LinkedIn, wrong phrase. Stuff I did at EMC, which I felt was impactful for EMC, didn't resonate with the startups that I started interviewing with when EMC was coming to a close. Didn't resonate at all. And so it was like I was talking different language than the startups were like, yeah, you don't get us, you don't. And I'm like, but I had all this great experience at SanDisk when we were just, a few hundred people, and didn't matter. It was right. So I had to sort of switch it up and make it more general, get people an idea of who I was, but not go into all the details, because then you start screening yourself out without you even knowing it.
And Tom, I totally agree with that. I think one of the things that I talk about with a lot of folks on my group and also in other presentations that I give is to understand what's at stake for the people that you're talking to, right? A lot of us, especially in these times, are in this whole mode that we need a job. And there are these memes that go around that are like, why do you want to work here? And people are like, oh, because I have bills to pay. And so, it's true that you have bills to pay, but on the other hand, you also need to know why that job exists in the first place. I see some comments here in the chat around how, worrying about whether you're too expensive and things like that. And that's actually the last thing that you should be thinking about, because they're opening up that role for a very reason. Most companies don't want to hire for roles, but they're going to hire for a role because they have a goal that they'd like to achieve, and maybe you're the person that's going to help them achieve that goal. And so if you speak their language, whether it's a small company, large company, and you're able to articulate their problems better than they can articulate their problems to you and offer that solution, then you're going to stand out above the entire rest of the competition.
And I think that kind of comes back to some of the chatter in the chat window. There's some concerns with, it used to be I was competing against other people that lived in San Francisco and Palo Alto and San Jose, where the rent is above average. And now if I'm competing against folks in Texas or something, that houses are, less than people spend on cars here. How's that affecting the job market? Are companies still preferring kind of local candidates with an eye to, well, eventually we'll be back in an office, or how does that play out?
So I think there's two things to that. I think the first thing is, if you do decide to move to another state and you're doing that this year, then your tax situation is going to change. And so you may have to pay taxes in both California and the state that you moved in. And even more so if you decide to stay in that state afterwards, as companies like VMware and others have demonstrated, you're going to take the pay cut that is going to be in conformance to cost of living standards. And so if you've been comfortably making 180 to 250 grand this whole entire time, those wonderful days are probably going to come to an end, because they know they can get away with not paying for that much elsewhere. The second piece is what you were talking about, which is eventually companies are going to want people back in the office for the most part, depending on the job. But I think for the most part, it's going to be back in the office, especially, if you need to be communicating with people all day and that face-to-face interaction. And, you know, like I work at Oracle, for example. We have so many offices across the Bay Area. There's no doubt in my mind that Larry Ellison is just going to sit there and be like, yeah, I don't want anyone to go back in the office. He's going to want everyone back in the office. And so I think that, and so I think that if you decide to move elsewhere and stick it out remotely for a little bit, then you're going to definitely compete with all the people who want to work remotely too, and maybe work at that high price. And so, yeah, I think when things go back to normal, it'll be normal for, I guess, normal in terms of however much it could be normal for the most part. And you should definitely be ready for things to come back, because, you know, economies are always cyclical. We're currently at a down part right now, and when it comes back, it's gonna be roaring back, that's for sure.
Is it harder to get hired in, given that you're competing against people that perhaps live in lower cost areas, where before you might only be competing against Bay Area candidates, but now you're competing against somebody in Iowa?
You know, I think there's a certain like culture of innovation and just community here in the Bay Area that, as much as other places try to replicate around the world, doesn't really like come to the same flavor. I don't know if people agree or disagree with that notion, but you know, I think, I mean, during normal times, I would tell people, like, you know, it's really competitive here. Like, you could be a rock star programmer out in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, but, you know, here, there's a guy who just walked off the plane at SFO who's gonna outcode you because he's been training his entire life for the next 3 days. And so there's that level of competition, there's that level of community here that you don't really find in many other places, and people still come here because all the investors are still here. And there will be a day again when you walk downtown Palo Alto past Coupa Cafe, and you're hearing people doing startup pitches to VCs over coffee. That day will be back. It may not be back in the next 6 to 8 months, but it'll be back. And so for those of you who moved away, I would say probably, do what you can to move back, because Silicon Valley will be good again. But I'm a local, and I'm just, I like this place. Happy to hear other thoughts, though.
Yeah, I want to piggyback real quickly on what Albert was just saying. I think you're absolutely correct, Albert, in that it is going to come back. But I don't know if the pendulum's going to swing all the way back, right? Because we are seeing a lot of companies that have decided that they're just going to go virtual or just offer it as sort of a additional. And that's what's going to actually give some additional competition to companies who have chosen to go on site 100%. Right? And so those companies going on site 100% are going to try to compete for talent that wants that additional flexibility, right? And that hadn't been, because it was more of a on-site market prior to COVID-19. And by necessity, people are learning how to collaborate and how to, do all that stuff remotely. I will say that I am completely in agreement that you're going to have this situation where their location is eventually going to catch up to them, because people are deciding, well, I'm going to move to Idaho. Nothing wrong with Idaho, beautiful state, but they decide they're going to move to Idaho. Well, when things sort of settle down and people are expected to go back in and say they're allowed to keep their position, their job, because now they'll be remote, they will likely get an Idaho-based pay, right? Which will be lower than a Silicon Valley-based pay. And so that time will come. So people have to be thinking about that, but companies also have to be thinking about their hiring strategy.
And granted, $100 goes further in Boise than it does in San Francisco.
Darn right.
So, I mean,
Darn right it does, right? So
yeah.
These are just the things, and we don't know what all the changes are going to bring. We just don't.
Yeah.
We can anticipate, but we may be very wrong. Who knows?
Yeah.
The $100 could go to just parking in certain buildings in San Francisco.
That's true. Yeah, and so I mean, like, I think also you eventually have these people moving to different towns and cities, and the cost of living will go up there too. And so it may be all very very little in terms of change, over time, depending on what hubs pop up. I mean, I don't see people going out to the middle of nowhere, Alaska, to start startup hubs. It just doesn't work that way.
Although if they're trapped indoors for half of the winter, they might have lots of time to code. So
yeah.
One never knows.
Get cooped up in a remote Alaska cabin. That makes for a great incubation period.
I've met a fair number of Scandinavian programmers who started out just that way. So I wanted to get to some of the other questions popping up. One of the sets of questions was coming up around the actual kind of interview process. Some companies have had cases where you went in and you met a panel of 6 people that all threw questions at you, which clearly is less easy to do in a work from home environment where everybody's individually zooming in. Have you seen different or heard of different kind of hiring patterns as far as, does it go now to 6, 7, 8 rounds of interviews, one-on-one? Has that been extended? And what is, if you have seen some differences, what are you seeing? So whoever, Tom or Al or Sandra?
I actually don't really. I think what happens is it's become multiple Zoom calls in a row with different people because everyone's at different places, which does make it a little bit more exhausting because you do have to play schedule Tetris and stuff. And so, are you asking like how to navigate that, or?
No, just wondering if before it used to be, all right, I'm gonna come on site for one day and slam through everything.
Yeah.
And now it's all right, I'm gonna get one interview today, one tomorrow, one next Wednesday, and this is going to be 2-week long process instead of just one.
Yeah, I think it's that way now because companies have to be empathetic to their workers, whether their workforces are raising kids, homeschooling, in between trying to do work, and so you have to be ready for what used to be. I believe like the average that it took to find a job pre-COVID was somewhere in the 35 to 45 day range, and in my mind, I'm just thinking nowadays you have to probably double that or at least multiply that by 1.5.
Does that line up with what you're seeing, Tom, in terms of pipeline?
Things are just taking longer. There's a lot more competition. There's a lot more people actually applying. We're having a lot more people just come through the website. But we are still finding that we're doing a lot of direct sourcing as well. And and then back to what Albert was saying about the interviews, we do it similarly. It's the back-to-back. Well, we do the back-to-back interviews. I don't remember if it was like one here, one there. We try to do, day interviews or 4-hour blocks so the person can, arrange for their space right away from kids or whatever if they can, and then, not have to sort of wedge it in between different things. But it's interesting. I was looking back at my interview actual experience with Proofpoint, and it was very much all over the place. And the reason is a lot of the people I was interviewing with were all over the world. So there was no way to get them all together in one spot. So I had interviews at 10 at night and interviews at 7 in the morning. And I think there's some of that's going on now.
We've got Raza had a very good question. Raza, did you want to ask your question? Because that question's come up a number of times.
So,
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, gladly. So, how can you tell apart basically an interviewer who's basically looking for pro bono product, let's say strategy consulting, versus hiring for a real position? I've been in that situation, and after a while, I've learned to tell the difference. But it varies from interview to interview and interviewer to interviewer. Like startup at a smaller company, and they're just looking for free consultant.
Yeah, and I've heard this from numerous people that were going for case studies type interviews, and they were asking for a full-blown presentation, go work on this for a week, and then give us a huge presentation top to bottom with all your analysis of the market. Any advice from any of you on navigating that whole sticky situation?
Pre-COVID, I would have said don't do it, and quoted that guy from Star Wars who said it's a trap, because it kind of can end up being a trap. But during COVID, the unfortunate thing to also say is, how badly do you want the job? because other people are going to be slaving away and doing this very same project. And so if you're the one coming back and saying, no, I don't want to do this project, and 10 other people are saying, yes, I will, that instantly takes you out of the running, and companies have that unfortunate leverage. And so I think, like, when it comes to it, it's best to give as much as you can possibly give without giving too much, whatever that may mean in your specific skill set and profession, where it's like, you maybe come to the border of where the next piece, where the next thing you do is, oh, I'm going to have to charge you my hourly for this. So to the very, very edge of it. And that's pretty much my thought, I think, on where you kind of go with that.
I'll just add it's the difference between what have you done and what would you do, right? So people are asking you about your background and things you've done to solve certain problems. That feels more interviewee. If they're saying, so solve this problem, and they're actually giving you one of their business problems. But, let's be fair to the company. Maybe they want to see how you would approach a real problem that they're facing. And the implication is that they're not just going to have one problem. Right, this is one problem. They're getting some different perspectives and different ways of looking at it. And yeah, it might help them think through how they're going to actually solve the problem. But if you're the person who does it in the way that they say, wow, this is something we want to see more of, then you come on board, you take that, and maybe you already have a head start on your first 3 months, and then rinse and repeat, right? So it's a sticky situation to be in. It really is.
Just one extra situation. I once interviewed with a company that wasn't asking case study questions, and I prepared as if they would. And so during the interview, I asked them, how are you handling this particular situation with your distributors? Your business model. Here's some things that I see as a potential issue, and that kind of clinched the interview at that point, because nobody else was jumping in to solve, kind of to look at their business at that level of detail. So that's you can also flip that if they're not giving you a case study and you read up on the company. That can be an interesting flip as well. So it kind of shows a different level of engagement. All right, so let's see, additional questions in the chat window. Feel free, by the way, if you haven't typed anything in, feel free to type something in or wave and raise your hand. There's a little reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom client that you can click, and it will allow you to virtually raise your hand if you're not on video. And hopefully we can spot you from there. Let's see, got a number of questions in here. Any tips on, and I'll throw this to Sandra because she hasn't had a chance to answer in detail. Any tips on negotiating and what that's like nowadays, especially since traditionally we've done negotiating face-to-face? That was like the final closing interview. Do you have any advice to share on negotiating and getting towards the tail end of the process?
That's out of my area of expertise.
Okay.
So. But there are a couple of questions that are coming in that I will answer after.
Okay, all right. Tom, did you want to talk about that at all? Do you have anything to share?
Sure, negotiating. I don't see a lot of differences with negotiating offers now than I did pre-COVID. Once you've gotten to the point, I don't know if that's a word, but once you've reached the point of actually getting an offer, then you're having a face-to-face discussion with the recruiter, or you're having a face-to-face discussion with the hiring manager of the job, and hopefully you've built a rapport with that person. So now you're comfortable talking to them on Zoom. They're ready to hire you. You're potentially ready to join, and you can have just a very transparent conversation. And the same rules of, negotiating still do apply. Like, people say never accept the first offer. I don't believe in that. What I think is you have to know who you're talking to and know who you're negotiating with. If you feel like this is one of those, sales things, you're going to go back and forth for a while, go ahead and play that game. That's fine. But let me give you an example. When I've been negotiating my whole career, right? So I've been a recruiter. I've been doing this for over 20 years. And, you know, I know when I need to tell the candidate, this is the offer. And I know when I need to tell a candidate, here's the offer, and knowing I can go to here because I just know they're going to negotiate with me. You kind of want to be in the same position when you're on the other side of the table. It's kind of know where the company's standing at and saying, you know, honestly, tell me, I really want a good offer. This is what I'm looking for. And tell me how it's going to be as you're getting closer to that end process. And like with Proofpoint, I took the offer they gave me, because I was like, this is really fair and it checks all the boxes. I'm not going to nickel and dime them. They did a nice offer for me and I was good with it. So I didn't negotiate. But there have been times when I'm like, are you kidding me? Right? And then you kind of go and you start doing that. Here's where I need to see some movement. But it is situational and and I don't think it changes because of COVID-19.
No, very good. I think Michael had a LinkedIn question, which would be good for Sandra. If you wanted to unmute and something about LinkedIn Premium.
Okay, yeah, I think I saw that. LinkedIn Premium job seekers membership is $30 a month. Once upon a time, it was $10 a month. It was a good deal. $30 a month is quite a lot. And business professional is $50 a month. Sales navigator, I'm not talking about, that's a whole different thing. But that's pretty expensive for what you get for it. They do have LinkedIn Learning, which is a very good suite of online courses, but you can get that LinkedIn Learning through your library. Most libraries have access to that. You can log into that. You can get some additional statistics. LinkedIn will make you think that you're going to get prioritized above other job seekers. I don't think that's true, and Tom can verify that. But the other thing is they are coming out there trying to make it something that you want to pay for. And it's going to be that premium users will get the new features first. Like there's a new design, the mobile app design, there's softer rounded edges, weird things. So if that is cool to you, then maybe you want to pay for it. In general, I tell people, I had it for 7 years because LinkedIn gave it to me for free for some work I did for nonprofits. And I used it to show people why they shouldn't pay for it. Does limit some of your searches, but there are ways around that. So mostly you don't need it.
So Sandra, you know they're going to be posting this on the public YouTube channel. So now LinkedIn's going to, or you're right there on my screen.
I've done talks at LinkedIn to groups that have met there, and they still let me in the building. It's amazing. Even with my company name, LinkedIn Mentoring, I keep waiting for a cease and desist list, letter, but.
Because I called Albert's list A list for a little bit. I got a cease and desist from Angel List earlier this year when they tried to launch their, I guess, their own like major job board, and then I think they actually they shut it down in March when COVID began. So,
Tom, is there any preference for LinkedIn Premium users when they? Not from anything you see. Thank you for.
Anyway, let me be very honest. I think LinkedIn has created a generation of recruiters who are myopically focused on LinkedIn, right? And what ends up happening is you get recruiters who kind of have this one mindset of I go to LinkedIn to find my people. I'm old school recruiter. Yes, I use LinkedIn. Yes, I used LinkedIn back in the day before anybody knew what it was, right? 2002, 2001. But I'm an old school recruiter. I'm a cold call recruiter. I'm the one that would go through lists and call people and try to get them interested in the job, and I think that's a lost art. But I will tell you, the recruiters that we hire at Proofpoint and the recruiters that I hired or I hired in my past, these are the people that not only understand LinkedIn, but they understand how to dig into LinkedIn and find great talent. The fact that it happens to be the first resume at the top of somebody paid to have their resume or their profile up at the top, doesn't matter. We dig into the details, we go down and we find the people that match the job, regardless if they're buried on page 5 or if they're highlighted in bright, sparkly, glitter on page 1.
Thank you. Tom asked something about, was there another source for salary information besides LinkedIn? The premium gives salary range information. I believe there are other sources for that, but I don't know what they are, but perhaps you could answer him in the chat or elsewhere.
Glassdoor comes to mind. I don't know if other people have other sources.
I think you can find some interesting stuff on Blind, right? People like, very interesting stuff on Blind. But that's the app that, it's like secret and nobody knows, right? And you can post all sorts of inappropriate things. But people will put like their actual salaries or the salaries of people that are hired. That's interesting. But as far as a centralized source, for a while people were using salary.com. I don't know how accurate that is. I never found it to be insanely accurate, but you kind of use a few different sources and you triangulate upon what you think it should be. Yeah, actually, it was interesting. Al said recruiters have to disclose salary in California. Correct, we do, but it's salary ranges, right? So we'll say 80 to 120 will be the salary range of the job, and that's a big range, right? So yes, we can do that, and yes, we would hire somebody at 80 if the person came in, and yes, we potentially could hire somebody at 120, but that is absolutely correct. There was a question earlier that was directed to me, and I'm trying to find it. It was from Nitul Shah. What is your perspective on interviewing and joining if selected for computer? What did you mean by that question? Can you explain it? Are you still there?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for going back so far. I know that it's first way back. Thank you for doing it. My question was around interviewing for a competitor company for a senior position that what one is in the current company in the COVID situation. So I know you mentioned about like there is a risk in these times and one should be safer in the one current company, but what if an competitor company is offering you for a senior position? What are some of the risks that come to your mind when you think of this?
That's a tough one because I kind of was in a weird situation. I was at Symantec, and I was being recruited by Proofpoint. Now, not that they compete in the exact same markets. I mean, Symantec does have an enterprise group, right? And there is some overlap, but I was interviewing for Proofpoint, and both are cybersecurity companies, right? So, and so that was kind of interesting. And I think you're talking a similar situation. So you have a competitor that's interviewing you, and it's a more senior position. The risk is that the company, I mean, I don't know what sort of non-disclosure stuff or conflict of interest stuff you signed. You should always look at that information, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really advise you there. But the risk is that the company you're working for will find out and they'll show you the door, right? I don't know what else, I don't know how else to put it, but there is risk there. And then you want to make sure you're not in any breach of any sort of contractual obligation that you had when you joined. You signed a bunch of paperwork. So they might say competitor companies and stuff. And usually when you leave, you would have signed documents like non-solicitation and things like that. And solicitation by which, you go to this new company and then you try to get all the people that were at your previous company to come with you. So you can't do that. But in California, at least, it's very difficult to enforce non-compete agreements. So people might even sign them, but they're really not very enforceable from what I understand. But they can still block you if they think you're going to work for a competitor and they don't like it. So there's a risk there.
I think we had a question in from Ali Samnad.
Yeah, so I can just say it if it's easier. So ghosting, my biggest pet peeve. You go to the interviews, multiple interviews, you talk to them, everything good, and then suddenly they go silence. You do your follow-up, you give them a week or two, you do another follow-up. But what is the right way of handling it? Should I just ignore and move on? Should I go and write a bad review for them on Glassdoor? What's the right, by the way, what is the right way of handling ghosting?
The right way to handle ghosting is to be so good at your job hunt that if somebody ghosts you, it doesn't matter. So what I like to say is that, the more irons you have in the fire, the more somebody ghosting you is not going to have an emotional impact on you and just slip right off your shoulders.
And if I may, the reason I'm a little bit excited about the subject is that this is a small valley. When they do that to you, I'd like to find one of those people and ask them the question that, don't you think 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now, I might be somewhere that I might be a customer, I might hire you, we want to do a business. Why do you ruin your reputation? A 10-second email says, thank you very much, you are just not the right person for us. I'm fine with it. But completely ignoring you, I just can't comprehend. The reason I say maybe a little is passion in my voice, I can't comprehend these people. I like to find one of them, grab them and say, tell me, why do you do that when you don't have to?
So I actually know some recruiters. I know a Facebook recruiter. I know some Google recruiters. So just in their defense, there's a whole heck of a lot of people pounding them with a whole lot of stuff, like was described. They are really, really busy. It's not personal. Every single one of them said it's not personal. Don't take it personally. It's just an inundation of stuff. You know, you're right. Should they write that and make it something really quick? Sure. But they're going through, I mean, the Googlers and the Facebookers are going through, 1,000 a week. So just a different perspective.
Yeah,
I'm gonna really quickly, Ali, I'm gonna empathize with you there. We actually have a couple reviews. People can go look on it on Glassdoor about ghosting that we've been part of, and it pains me every time I see those. It grabs me right here because, and have I been a recruiter that has ghosted a candidate in the past? Yes. Maybe for the same reason Mark was talking about it, I've done it. But I will tell you that it is a real problem. It is very frustrating for a candidate. And it happens sometimes when you're trying to recruit people, they go ghosting you as well, right? You're trying to recruit somebody and then they want to get 3 or 4 offers, put those 3 to 4 offers on their kitchen table and kind of see which one the light hits the best. And they'll choose that one. And you don't know, you're like, well, we have this offer out to you, what's going on? But you're absolutely correct. I think one of the things you can do is, politely follow up, but also follow up with the hiring manager. If you've gone through the interviewing process, you can reach the hiring manager and say, hey, Susan or John or whoever it is, I haven't heard back. Happy if, to move on if this is not the right fit, but I would love just to get a status. You can even let the recruiter know, hey, recruiter, I'm going to reach out to the hiring manager just to kind of see where things stand because I'd like to know. I give them every opportunity to sort of circle back with you, but if they really are just ignoring you and they've spent the time and you've spent the time to interview, that is what drives me up the frickin' wall. If you've taken the time to interview the candidate, you owe them, right? You owe them a call back. I'm still waiting for a call back from a company I interviewed in 2009. I think maybe this week, who knows? But
This is how it works. This is how it happens.
I keep giving them an extra week, and no, but all kidding aside, there is the avenue of Glassdoor. People have used it. You could put a good review, and then just send them a little note. I would have liked to get a call back. I was kind of ghosted at the end, but the overall experience was good, right? So you don't give them a 1-star review, but you send a message. Maybe it's a 4-star review, right? I don't remember how many stars Glassdoor has, 4 or 5, right? But maybe that's the way to do it. But you're right, it's a real problem. It's very frustrating.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say don't go out of your way to write reviews because everything is permanent on the internet. So you don't want to be a victim of that either.
No flamethrower. Joe had a question, just kind of related in the same lines. Is it too much to ask for feedback on why you weren't selected if you've gone through, 3 interviews and you're down into the final thing? And can you ask for updates from them as far as well, did the other guy have a PhD or what's the is that
you can absolutely ask. You're not going to get the answer you probably want. But most likely what you're going to hear is that, we hired another person whose skills match the position a bit better. Really appreciated your time though. And we'll keep your resume on file for future opportunities. Thank you very much. That's what you're going to hear. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what.
Yeah. I mean, unless you have a private, like personal relationship with that recruiter, you're just going to get boilerplate.
Yeah. Companies do that to sort of protect themselves. I find it a shame.
Yeah.
I'd love to give people real information. And when I was a recruiter, I did the best I could to provide real information. You know, gosh, you know, the person that came in just was a little bit stronger in the product management with the engineering background. I know you have an engineering background, but it's mechanical engineering. This position was really focusing on the electrical side, and that's the person we hired. So trying to give something that's objective. But sometimes there's, you know, a fit with the hiring manager and the person they feel they could actually interact with, and that's a little bit harder to pin down.
Yeah, thanks for answering that question. And as a follow-up too, I mean, I've done this a couple of times now, and if you do have that referral that did refer you into the job, sometimes it's helpful to reach out to that person because they can give you the unspoken words as well.
That's a good point. All right, we're down in our final 5-ish minutes here. Did anybody else have any additional follow-on questions? Now's your chance to either put it into the chat window or raise your hand and we can call on you. Let's see if I have any ones from the pre-submitted questions here. Let's see, if you are in currently a job and you think you might not be rolling forward if things are proceeding, is there anything that you should be thinking about doing? I'm presuming the obvious answer is make sure your resume and LinkedIn is up to date, but is there any other things that folks should be working on in the meantime?
Yeah, I definitely have some thoughts here, and I would love to hear Sandra's opinion as well, because I think there's a lot to do with LinkedIn. And is it Sandra or Sandra? I so don't want to get
Sandra, I answered to
Sandra. Anything? All right. I refer, and people say, hey, you, and I go, oh,
It's all good. Just don't call me late for dinner, you know, that thing.
Got it. So what was the question? I completely lost my train of thought.
If you currently have a job, but you think that there might be, you know.
Yeah. So really it is about networking, right? One of the things that people don't think about is they think about applying to a job, right? That's easy. Go into LinkedIn and some ATSs, which is applicant tracking systems, are all connected, and you push a button and it pre-populates all your information into the company website. And then you write a little blurb about yourself, about why you're interested in the job, hit submit, and you're like, booyah, done. That is the worst way to find a job, because companies like any company is just going to get a lot of those applicants. Really what I've found is one of the best ways for people to get a job. A technique I used back actually when I was looking for a job. I was at SanDisk. I was kind of like, should I leave? Should I stay? And I interviewed with, I actually was interested in 9 jobs. And what I did is I used this approach and I got interviews at all 9 jobs, right? And we're talking everything from the big companies to small companies. What I did is I found out who was the hiring manager in each of those 9 companies, and I contacted that person directly, however it took, right? I called into the main number. I said, hey, Oracle, how you doing? Can you connect me? I'm using that as a funny example, Albert. But I called into the main line, got the person on the phone if I could, or found out their email address, sent them an email. I talked about email verifier. If the name's unique enough, like you can sometimes do first name dot last name a company and test whether that email address actually pings the server and comes back with a valid email response, and then you email that person. But it really is about getting in front of the hiring manager if you are the right fit for the job. And, you know, so it sometimes, you know, you kind of go around the recruiter, because the recruiter is getting a lot of resumes and the hiring manager may be getting 5, 6, because you contacted them directly.
Right. I'd like to add something. Is that stay in touch with people when you're not asking them for something. It's you know, it's so easy, and you know, just quick and easy. The LinkedIn makes it easy. You could do video messages. You have to do the video message on your phone. It plays on the computer or the phone. You can do audio messages. You can send text. You know, different kinds of messages. You can pick the phone. You can send them an e-card. just quick little things with no ask, thinking about you. I saw this great movie. I thought of you. You might want to see it. Just stay in touch. So when you do have the ask, it's not like, oh, here's this person that I knew from work 5 years ago, and now they're asking me about the job at the company. If you've stayed in touch, send them articles about updates with technology to show you're on top of it. And then they're going to be much more open to that. Might even proactively think of you when they have job openings, but just stay in touch, whatever it is, LinkedIn or other.
That's a really good point, Sandra, because I actually got somebody tagged me in a LinkedIn post recently who was a recruiter who worked with me a couple years ago and was just like, hey, thinking of you, tagged you in the post because remember when we did this? And I was like, yeah, if that person ever contacted me about something, I would be like, hey, you contacted me. I'm happy to chat because they.
So I don't need to take it personally that you haven't accepted my LinkedIn request. Just busy, I know. But yeah, don't take things personally. And if you send requests to connect to people, they're not, for the most part, ignoring you. They're just too busy. They're not even looking at their request. You can withdraw it, wait, I think 2 weeks, or it might be 3, I can't remember off the top of my head, and then resubmit it so that it pops up again at the top. And, it's not personal.
So we've got 3 questions in the queue here, so we'll wrap up with these. The next one, I'm not entirely certain if it was on LinkedIn specifically, but the question was how many references or recommendations should you have typically, or what's the expectation there?
Ooh.
Well, the LinkedIn, my understanding is that when recruiters use LinkedIn Recruiter, they get a summary and it doesn't give the recommendation, it gives the number of recommendations. I don't know if that's true or not, but I was told that if you should have at least 5. More is better, depends where you are in your career. So that's, and that's totally separate from skills and endorsements.
There you go, very good. Let's see, and then the last 2 questions here, and Albert, thanks. I know you had a schedule conflict, so thanks very much for all your help.
No worries, this was great. Thank you for having me here again. I very much appreciate it.
Excellent. And thanks, we'll hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, I would love to come back. I think your calendar sounds great. Should I? Yeah, just put me on an email list.
Yeah, we'll stay in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, bye.
And then for Tom and Sandra, the other 2 questions that came up still, one was around gaps in employment and how to handle that. How long is too long of a gap? And I imagine the question in a COVID situation might be a little bit different around that. But I know, having gone through like background checks and things, they say, well, why were you unplugged for 3 months? It's like, well, that's how long a job search takes. Any guidance around gaps in the resume and what to do there?
I mean, there's probably Tom's point of view about how he views it. There are ways in LinkedIn to fill that gap. You can put a filler position, that you're available for long-term and full-time positions with your expertise so that it's listed there. You can put in some of the volunteer work you're doing. You can put in some of the education you're currently doing. So there are ways to fill the gaps. As they get longer, it becomes trickier, but there absolutely are ways to address that. How it's viewed, I'm interested to hear myself.
Yeah, I really don't have any biases against people who've had gaps in their career. I've had gaps in my career, right? .com bust. I was out of work for 9 months. There was gaps between certain jobs where I got laid off from one. I got laid off from EMC, right? When Dell acquired, they decided to move all operations over here, and I was kind of left in the wind. So I got laid off, and it took me a few months to find something. Me personally, I don't really have bias against that. There are people that do, but one of the things I recommend for you as you're looking at gaps is to, what are you doing to keep yourself relevant? How are you, I love what Sandra just said about volunteer work or, taking classes, or there's lots of other things you can talk about. And also, that's where cover letter like, I'm not a fan of cover letters, like just in general. Cover letters, I think, are a great way to get yourself screened out than in, but they're a great way to explain a gap, right? They're a great way for you to say, hey, you know, I took some time off to take care of an ailing family member, or, you know, the company, you know, went through a COVID-19 layoff and I was, you know, stuck for 6 months while the job market was pretty cold. And, you know, I'm looking now and this is a great opportunity. So, you know, open transparency, don't try to paint it a color it's not, but do also try to keep yourself relevant, right? You don't want to just sit there and watch cartoons all day, which I'll tell you, for the first 1 month of my first layoff, when I lost my job in the dot-com bust, I did a lot of like cartoon watching and bowls of cereal. It was awful. I was like a 14-year-old again. But then I got off my butt and I started really being serious about things, and I got things moving. So, you know, but a good cover letters is a way to sometimes explain what's going on there.
So you weren't researching new media opportunities.
I was newly married. I got laid off from a contract, literally laid off. I lost my contract job, and then there was no work for like almost a year, right, during the dot-com bust. And so I was feeling sorry for myself for probably the first month. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I started my own business, right? I'm like, okay, I got to do this. And I started my own business, and I was able to create T&L Consulting, which got me through. And then I, you know, took that to SanDisk and then got hired regular full time. But, you know, you gotta pick yourself up and figure out what you're going to do with your time. And then you can communicate that in a meaningful way, and in the cover letter, even on the resume. If it's like volunteer work for a particular organization where you're building out XYZ for them, but you're not getting paid, but you're learning.
Joe wanted to clarify, you know, were you recommending skipping the cover letter? Like if they don't ask for it?
Well, think about it this way: how much time does a person spend writing their resume? They spend weeks, right, agonizing over every paragraph, over every word, and the way you're characterizing it. And was it 23% increase in revenue, or was it 23.8% increase in revenue? Should I round that up to 24%? I mean, lots of things you're spending. And then you write a cover letter in like an hour, like 15 minutes, right? So what a great way to add in some grammatical errors and some, you know, funky way of writing that they're like, what? I think cover letters are great for things like marketing jobs, maybe product management. Maybe they want to understand your communication style. There's nothing wrong with it, but spend the time to do it well. Don't get too casual and just write a quick cover letter and try to send that off. I've seen it more often than not that cover letters are either ignored like entirely, so you're spending all this time to do something that's not being looked at, or they can be a good way to explain gaps or even changing in careers. Like if you want to move from career A to career B, not that this is a good time to do that, as Albert was mentioning, but you want to go from, say you have an engineering degree. I saw this happen a few times, right? Say you have an engineering degree and you're doing the engineering work and you're like, I really don't like coding, right? But I'm happy to be a product manager in a company because I understand coders, I know what they need, I've done it, and I want to be a product manager. This is my goal and I'm changing my career. A great cover letter can help to explain how you've taken on this new vision in your career path to kind of go to that next step.
Very good. So I'll close off with almost a tailor-made question here, and I've got my own answer towards the end of this, but somebody was asking, with all of us kind of locked in our houses and in areas where we're not supposed to be meeting folks and that sort of thing, any interesting things you've seen out there in terms of being able to network with people, and how do you get those connections once we're all like locked in our own little cells? Any thoughts around that? I think that's a struggle for folks who's traditionally met folks in person or through, you know, in-person, you know, hobbies and clubs and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I will just add that Proofpoint does a lot. We had to move all of our events virtual. So we do a lot of like Discover Proofpoint events, which historically have been hiring events for like sales. But we've also done tech talks and such. We started doing those. We'll bring in great leaders. Sometimes we'll have great leaders in a particular engineering organization or another organization that'll come in and talk about a topic of import or interest. And it's really just to educate people about not something specifically Proofpoint related, but about industry related. And so we'll go out and we'll invite people to that. And sometimes we'll post, and I'll see other companies do this. They'll post on LinkedIn, hey, we're having an information session. Go to those, right? I mean, it's worth an hour of your time. And if it's not good, it's still, you got to see a bunch of people. You maybe wrote down some names, or, hey, here's my email address, you're writing down some email addresses, right? Those are opportunities to network in a different way. I'm not a huge fan of virtual job fairs. I've seen some companies do that, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I like those too much. But some companies might, people might enjoy those. You can go talk to a recruiter virtually, go into breakout rooms and stuff. But we're all sort of having to figure this out on the fly. Even 9 months later, or however, 6 months, 7 months, I can count. But whatever it is, right? Later, people are still figuring it out, right? It's still so unnatural to people to be meeting this way. So, try different things.
I just say, the more that you do something rather than just the kind of artificial networking or meeting, online wine tastings. My husband did an online whiskey tasting the other day where you're doing something, you have something to talk about. A lot of people are not socially, who loves networking, even when you go in a big room of people. Now you're in a big room on screen. It's so uncomfortable. Toastmasters, places where you have an activity to do, I think are great and sort of take you out of yourself and make it much more natural to network.
Toastmasters is that's definitely been helpful for folks. I've had a number of colleagues that were kind of engineering focused, and they didn't have this on-stage presence, and they weren't used to doing presentations because they were usually locked in front of a keyboard and screen. And that's proven quite helpful for folks. I think meetup.com has got a number of things. A friend of mine just took an online cooking class from a chef whose restaurant was closed, and they actually sent out the ingredients ahead of time to everyone's kitchens, and along with a bottle of wine, and they got the ingredients, and everybody was cooking in their kitchen together. So that was kind of a thinking outside the box activity. But as you said, if it's if you have something mutual to gather around, I think it's a little difficult to do in larger groups, because usually on these platforms, only one person can talk at a time, and you can't wander around and say, oh look, there's Joe, I haven't seen him. And you don't get that same level of 5 or 6 interesting conversations that you can walk past and something catches your ear and you say, wait a minute, I know about that. So I think we're still struggling to replicate that, but certainly Meetup and missing the obvious SVPMA. And we normally have a slightly longer networking section, but we wanted to make sure we had enough time for Q&A today. So with
there was
that,
one more question. Well, there was one more question here.
Okay.
Can I just quickly answer it? When a company asks if you have other offers on the table, what do you say? I know is to see how fast they should move in the interview process. Was it to gauge how valuable you are from a perception standpoint? Just be honest, right? If you have an offer on hand and it's like you have it, yeah, I received an offer, but I'm really interested in your company. Happy to chat with you. If it's the right opportunity, I think we can probably figure it out pretty quickly. If you don't have any offers, you just say, no, nothing yet, but I am interviewing with a few companies and would love to consider this. Don't know how fast everybody's going to move, but I'm happy to go through your process and hopefully it all works out. And then as say you go 2 weeks into your interview process and you get like 2 offers, let them know. Like, I did receive a couple offers. They look pretty good, but I'm, and if it's not your number 1 company, just tell them, I'm really interested in you guys, but my timeline just got a little contracted. So hopefully we can move things along a little more quickly. So just be open and honest and transparent, but don't try to use it as hard leverage. Like, I got another offer, you gotta let me know by Friday. That usually doesn't play well, but if you have a nice dialogue, then you can negotiate something usually.
very good, very good. Yeah, 'cause they might say, well, go ahead, take that other offer.
Later, right?
Very good. All right, well, with that, I think we are going to wrap up this evening. I wanted to remind folks that we are on svpma.org. If this was useful to you, we also have other past recruiting presentations, among them Tom's prior presentations. We do make these meetings available as recordings on our svpma.org website. So those of you that were asking for slides and things, stay tuned. We will get this cross-posted. I wanted to give a special thank you to our panelists tonight. This was a phenomenal opportunity to really chat with folks that are looking at this from 3 different angles, and they're right in the middle of everything. And we're all, as we're isolated, trying to navigate and struggle through, you know, are you seeing what I'm seeing? So I think this was very, very useful. Stay tuned. We have a number of interesting presenters lined up on the calendar, so keep an eye on the SVPMA mailing list. We hope to see all of you back next month, and wish you the best of luck for those of you who are looking for new opportunities. And with that, I'll close off this evening and wish you all a good night. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everybody.